Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. 2 8 magnitude earthquakes hit Turkey on February 6th of 2023, and we are investigating where this magnitude of energy came from. So there's only two possibilities for the production of 2 8 magnitude earthquakes. This is an explosive and a massive, massive force. It's a power beyond human and any normal human being. This is an incredible force of power, and there's only two possibilities for where this power, how this power was generated, and that is either the power came from the location or the power came from another location. So that was 2 8 magnitude and several 7 magnitude. So this was just such an incredible and repeatedly pulsing explosions. 8 magnitude followed by a 7 10 minutes later, and then 9 hours later another 8 magnitude explosion, and followed by 7s. So let's imagine that let's first see if the power may have come from another location. So if the power came from another location, there is the high probability that this magnitude of energy would have traveled either traveling from the sides, north, south, east, and west, traveling to Turkey, this energy, or the energy came from under Turkey. So the high probability that the energy was at least contributed from another location. There is the deep earthquakes that occur near the Pacific tectonic plate. Earthquakes that occur in this area, their energy tends to expand west along this course of the plate boundary and directly towards Europe. So we could suppose that the energy came from a deep earthquake in this area, which have a pattern of releasing energy directly towards Europe, or that it was contributed, the energy was contributed from shallow earthquakes in this area, and the energy traveled out towards Europe. And then there is the question of if it was an explosive energy and it traveled. Why did it not release at the point of least resistance anywhere in this area along the way? As if it was traveling, there were points of least resistance along the way, and yet it did not release at those pressure points. It traveled directly to Turkey. And knowing that this is a electrical energy, you can use those properties to increase your explanation into the investigation of where that magnitude of energy could have come from. So I did look to see if it was possible that this magnitude of energy could have come from afar, that it would have been embedded with the pattern of energy that was traveling from the east towards Europe, that the normal frequent pattern of movement is that it will travel from Fiji. So look at the deep earthquakes in Fiji. From January to February, there were deep 5 magnitude earthquakes happening in Fiji every other day. And that was throughout January, and in February, even before, during, and after the earthquake in Turkey, the earthquakes, Fiji remained, it's maintained its pattern of rhythmicity. So if we can't expect any of these, any activity in Fiji from December, January, or February to have contributed to the 8 magnitudes in Turkey, then possibly it was not a deep earthquake, it was a shallow earthquake. So we looked at the area around Australia for shallower, large earthquakes that may have contributed, and did not find anything significant in the month of January or February that could have contributed to the big magnitude of energy that attacked Turkey. And we'll look at the adjacent and frequently you say clustering. We'll look at nearby clustering of earthquakes and the pattern of them near Turkey, which would be the cluster in Tajikistan and the cluster in Afghanistan and Iran on the so in the energetic travels to Europe, they stop at Turkey and cluster there where we did have the terrible event. They also cluster in along the Tajikistan-Afghanistan border here. This is the cluster pattern that we see maintained for this region, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and also in Iran. Here we see the clustering. And what's notable, if we were to consider the contributing forces, if there were, if the reason for the 8 magnitude of energy is contributed by the area of the land itself, then we would expect to see them cluster near weak points of the earth. We do know that Turkey has a large number of volcanoes, and that we did not see them. Of all the activity in Turkey at the great event, this area here was affected, and you can see that there is a volcano map of Turkey, and they have listed the active and the significant volcanoes as to the east and to the west of them, and that they were not affected in the 8 magnitude power level events, not affected, nor after. So the significant volcanoes, and here near the Hatay province is where the big activity occurred, and right alongside of it there was no reported activity. So I looked at the Tajikistan Afghanistani border area to see if that cluster could have potentially contributed to the movement and the gaining of magnitude of energy towards Turkey. In January, the Tajikistan-Afghanistan border had 4 and 5 magnitude earthquakes alternating between the border of Tajikistan and Afghanistan, 4 and 5 magnitude earthquakes. And the pattern of the frequency of the earthquakes increased on some days to maybe 5 to 10, 5 or 10 earthquakes maybe on specific days, and then reducing its frequency to maybe 1 or 0 earthquakes a day along this Tajikistan-Afghanistan border, and maintaining the magnitude of 4. So we should look at also Iran. Iran in January had Iran in January had 4.5 magnitude earthquakes and several 5.0 magnitude earthquakes here, and there is a reported 6 magnitude earthquake that happened in Iran that is obviously, that information has been changed in the USGS archives, and that would have been maybe a week to 2 weeks before the 8 magnitudes in Turkey. we'll look at the day of the event in Turkey. So on day 1, so Turkey has, these are the faults in Turkey. All of the activity occurred here at the crux of the East Anatolia fault system and clearly rattled the Dead Sea Transform, which later did not continue to, or rather it stabilized quickly, whereas the East Anatolia fault system did not stabilize for a month afterwards. And you can see that, so there's the events, and here is a map of all of the hydroelectric power in Turkey. So this is the area that we are looking at here near the Hatay province, and there is a lot of electrical or hydroelectric dams here. A lot of dams that are producing all of this power that could have attracted a magnitude concentration of energy, but you can see that they're also everywhere from here to there, from east to west and north and south. So it does not explain the concentration of energy there. And here is the place marks in yellow for significant energy generation. There is Atlas Energy, or that's a power plant. Here is another electrical power plant. Here is an electrical power plant. Here is an electrical power plant. Here is a thermal power plant. Here is an electrical power plant. Here is an electrical, I'm sorry, that's not an electrical power plant. These two here are quarries. They are mining companies, and these are quarries. So you can see that there is a ring pattern around this area, which is natural and follows the land formation. It's a natural way of human development. And here is the first big 8 magnitude event adjacent to the quarries, and there's even a power station down here. Then here is the second 8 magnitude event. And the pattern on day 1 is that there's a massive explosive movement here of an 8 magnitude that kills 50,000 people in 1 minute. And for the remainder, the next several hours, this city here, Nurhak, is incredibly active. And you would see this pattern of, this is the original movement. And here's the first 8 magnitude. And then throughout the day, it continues to pattern all around this area, and especially continuing to hammer in this area, Nurhak. So after this pattern, The next big explosive 8 magnitude movement occurs just a couple kilometers from it here. This is the second 8 magnitude event here. And then the pattern shifts from heavily involving, not only Nurhak was involved on the first major explosion, also Sinsik. So this explosion triggered a weakening of this area and a weakening of this area until 9 hours later, another explosion which broke this area, killed thousands more, and then continued to there was a pattern of continued hammering at Guksun and at Siklan. So it would have been explosion, and then explosions, hammer, 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 and then explosions and hammer, 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 hammer. Here, after the second explosion, the tremors continued to hammer there. So what we absolutely did see was that after the main event, there was a particular involvement of the cities of Sinsik over to the far east and of Nurhak. And then afterwards, the second major explosion, 8 magnitude, and we continue to see the pattern of very heavy movement in the east and to the west of there at Dogenshire and Guksun. I'm sorry, at Siklan and Guksun, and which also heavily involved the Donahir. So at the end of day 1, February 6th of 2023 in Turkey, there is an earthquake every 10 minutes of a 5 magnitude. And that there's a handful of cities that are repeatedly absorbing massive magnitude at a 5 magnitude. The same cities which were heavily involved: Siklan, Nurhak, Tut, Afsin, Ikonozu, and Guksun. After which the first day also included heavily the Sinsik and the Day 2, February 7th, 2023. There is every 30 minutes a 4.5 magnitude, which is basically a 5 magnitude because it's absolutely always minimized. There is a pattern of harm minimization by the USGS and all of the seismic activity reporting. So that would have been a 5 every 30 minutes. On day 2, there was a 5 magnitude earthquake, and they heavily concentrated in Nurhak, which was adjacent to that second 8 magnitude. And towards the end of day 2, very heavily in Guksun, which was to the west of that 8 magnitude. So what we did see from the end of day 1 and day 2 is that there was a handful of cities that absorbed and captured all of this repeated violence, intensity of energy. And we still want to know why we can see that there is a ring pattern, which is different from the North Anatolia Fault. The North Anatolia Fault area up here, there is electrical generation here, and you can see that it doesn't entirely form a ring pattern. It's not a ring pattern. It's got other electrical generating stations inside of it that break up that the ability for the energy accumulate that way. So the only significant difference about these electrical generation stations may have been contributed from the fact of the ring pattern, but certainly the 8 magnitude of violence at extreme violent energy could not be explained by that. There would have to be some massively powerful forces contributing. And to imagine that the massive energy came from the sun, and that or atmospheric disturbances contributed to that is a low probability, because you would have to directly channel an incredible power, and the sun is just not capable of directly channeling that into a small region with the Earth's rotation and with the size of the sun and the size of the sun's energy bursts. It would not create that pattern. So then at the end of day 3, so day 3, we finally see, so day 1, every 10 minutes we were having a 5 magnitude energy absorbed into the East Anatolia Fault. And on day 2, the 10-minute interval of 5 magnitude decreased to a 5 magnitude every 30 minutes. And then day 3, now the intensity decreased to a 5 magnitude every 30, or it maintained its pace of every 30 minutes and decreased a little in intensity. And by day 9, it was every 30 minutes of 4, at least a 4 to 4.5 magnitude absorption of energy. And then by the 10th, so this is 4 days later, by the 10th of February, there was every few hours, twice every couple of hours, there would be a 4 magnitude. On the 11th, twice every few hours, there was a 4 magnitude. Then on the 12th, the frequency decreased even more, twice every few hours. And on the 13th, there was a dramatic decrease of the frequency from twice every few hours to half that. So once every few hours. So that would be 5 days later that the energy being absorbed into the East Anatolia Fault system had gone from an incredibly, extremely violent intensity and frequency to a more naturalized frequency. It took 5 days. And by the 20th, when we had another great nearly 7 magnitude energy down in the Hatay province, down in the Dead Sea Transform, or more near the Dead Sea Transform, by then, even though we did get that great 7 magnitude of earthquake, the frequency and intensity in the East Anatolia and this region had had maintained a lower frequency and remained at that rhythmicity and did not increase its pattern of frequency or intensity even up to the 20th when the next event happened in Zunbag. And that the high frequency pattern that continued for East Anatolia was in Nurhak and Sinsik. And there is a very curious pattern in the 30 days after the big event on February 6th, and it was that there was a frequency of about 6 earthquakes a day for the East Anatolia fault system, and they're at a 4 magnitude. It's quite unstable, and they are double tapping every few hours. So every few hours, there will be 2 4 magnitude earthquakes occurring very near in time, like within the hour of each other. And they will be generally on a separate location of the fault system. And it's the energy seems to move from the east to the west, to the east to the west. And that would be about every 3 or 4 hours, there will be an earthquake, and then another earthquake within the hour. Another couple of hours will pass, 3 or 4 hours will pass by. So it is very curious where this energy could have possibly come from. And in the past 20 years, we have had more bigger, more deadly earthquakes in the past 20 years than we have in the past 200. And certainly in the past 100 years of the earthquake records, the deadliness exploded in the past 20 years. And if there ever in the history of the world in the past thousands of years was such great movement, this would have absolutely been embedded in the collective